I think it's about 15% of businesses at the moment in the UK get successfully sold.
When you had a job, you were only doing things that you loved to do because that was what your career was.
At a certain point in the life cycle, the leader needs to know less about a subject than someone else in the room. How better to get the right person rather than the best available person at the time you feel you need somebody.
I always say if you're growing through referrals, you have a fantastic foundation because what you're doing a great job.
I work on a quality over quantity mentality.
Welcome to the podcast From Cold to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder here at SRC Growth Partner, a growth company that helps professional services firms from around the world increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is Nick Cramp, co-founder of the Rethink Collective. Nick is a business leadership specialist who works exclusively with founders of adolescent-stage businesses. Those successful companies generating recurring profit, but still entirely dependent on their founder. Nick is the author of Better Before Bigger and specializes in helping entrepreneurs transition from founder-led to leader-led businesses. His work focuses on a critical challenge many business owners face: how to break free from being trapped by the very business they built so they can build effective leadership teams and redefine their relationship with their company. Nick, welcome to the pod.
Thank you very much.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I love this kind of topic, right? And as a founder myself, and I know that a lot of our viewers and listeners out there are founders themselves as well, it's a challenging journey in itself, right? And you go with the idea that the end goal is something worthwhile. This is always an interesting topic because it's understanding the different phases of growth, different phases of business, and you being an expert in those, it'll be interesting to dig into that. But before we jump into the protein of the conversation, can you walk us through your journey to becoming a specialist in adolescent stage businesses and what led you to focus on this specific phase rather than startups or mature enterprises or anything like that?
Sure. So I did A-levels, did a degree, did a bit of traveling. I've only ever worked for someone for 18 months. So I had a job for about 18 months as a health club manager. And then I got the opportunity to buy a health club. So it was back in the days when banks used to lend money and you could borrow lots of money. Foolishly or whatever, me and my best mate from university borrowed a bunch of money, bought a health club, and then spent the next 15 years working out how to run a business. So we had a passion for the subject, but we had no experience in business or as business owners. So I spent the first 15 years odd of my working life running businesses. We also opened a preschool and nursery. So we had 2 SMEs. We had about 45 staff at one point. So it was very much a learning about business at the coalface and actually working out what to do and what not to do through a lot of trial and experiment. This was before internet. So this was, operating in a vacuum to a large extent. There wasn't online gurus, there wasn't the availability of information, which is probably double-edged. Sometimes there's too much information out there right now. So we had the luxury of not having that to some extent. So it was very much self-learned. 2008 recession came along and unfortunately we had to close one business and we sold the other business. So the end point for me was much sooner than I'd imagined when I started the business, and I wasn't really prepared for that. So I then fell into business coaching via a bit of business advisory. Coaching at that stage was a very embryonic industry in the UK, and it wasn't the done thing to have a coach. It was seen sometimes as a negative thing because you weren't succeeding, you needed a coach. It's really interesting how in sport, every top level performer has a coach, multiple coaches. But in business, there hasn't always been that same relationship. That's changed dramatically for the good. So I started coaching. I trained in America under E-Myth and developed how to coach. I coach businesses across the world via Skype. So I had a very good introduction into coaching. But what I soon realized is that there was a certain type of business and a certain type of founder that I really enjoyed spending time with. And that was the ones in this adolescent phase. where they're trying to work out what they individually want to do next, as well as what's next for the business. When we're launching a business, in essence, it's quite simple. We just go as fast as we can, as hard as we can, but that only gets you so far. And there's this critical point where you need to transform the way the business operates, so it's not all about you. And that was the interesting point that I wanted to work with founders on. So I wrote my book, Better Before Bigger, which is my philosophy around what you need to do at that point. I think initially we all want to have a bigger business, but at some point we need to prioritize better, because the systems we have, the people we have, and the profitability aren't suitable for where you want to get to. You need to upgrade various elements of the business. And to do that for a period, you need to sacrifice growth. So whether it's a year, one of my clients recently called it their plateau year. And they said, right, this year we're going to try and make the same profit as previous year, but what we're going to focus on is getting better. And we spent time and effort improving the business so that they've grown from that point, because without that improvement, they would have reached the natural capacity of what they could be in terms of business size and profitability. So that's how I've ended up focusing on this particular area, partly through my personal experience and partly through just narrowing my niche as I've worked as a coach.
It's really interesting the way you explain the journey that you had, primarily because every single, I think there's a point in growing a business, what you mentioned there, where it's no longer about you anymore, right? And it is very much, you're no longer building what sole trade or one-man band or anything like that. Once you start hiring, then you start realizing, okay, this is a different kettle of fish. And then as you grow in that level, you're still the leader, you're still in the day-to-day, you're still working in the grind. And it's so important to get to a phase where you go, okay, well, I need to be able to trust others in the organization to be able to take that heavy lifting so I can think about strategy. And I think that's really key to what you're saying, in the sense that building out the relevant leadership teams in an organization is so, so important. And going back to one of your points you mentioned there about business coaches as well, I always say to everyone, even Roger Federer needs a coach, right? Or needed a coach. And it's like, what makes you any better than the best in the world, right? And if it might be like a slight angle change or anything like that, for a golfer to change just an inch in their swing can add 100 yards to their overall swing. And they won't know that until someone objectively looks at their circumstances, right? When you're in it, it's like you don't smell what you're in, right? So, yeah, absolutely. So I love the fact that you focus on such a specific area in the growth cycle of a business owner. So talk to me more about your approach. Obviously, you mentioned there better before bigger, which I absolutely love. Talk to me about your approach and how you get business owners, founders, executives to be able to go, okay, growth isn't everything I need right now. Like, I need to rein back and go, okay, let's look at what I can do.
I think there's a couple of things that come to mind that we focus on. The first thing is that there's a realization from the founders we're working with that more growth is not necessarily going to be more fulfilling. So there's this sense that growth is not the sole answer, and what they're looking for is personal fulfillment, because the reality is that very few businesses get sold for the massive payday that they were hoping for. I think it's about 15% of businesses at the moment in the UK get successfully sold. Some are passed on via management buyouts or ETOs, EOTs, but most just fade and die when the founder stops. So once they appreciate that reality, it's then, okay, well, what relationship do you want with your business for this next period? How do you change that relationship so it's more fulfilling? If you can't be guaranteed that end destination, why don't we enjoy the journey? Why don't we focus more on enjoyment today and tomorrow by creating a more fulfilling role? So we start with that. And from that, if they accept that premise, then the next stage is, okay, well, we need a leadership team now that's going to run the business without you so you can create that different role. And that's where my business partner, Alice, comes into play. So Alice joined me 12 months ago, and her specialty and gift is converting managers into leaders. So she's very good at helping these people step up into a leadership role and acquire the skills and the confidence to take on more responsibility for leading a business. So the first point is that recognition from the founder that something needs to be different. And once I've got the buy-in from them that they're willing to go through this journey, then we roll out the program, which is a combination of coaching, workshops, and retreats. So we have 3 elements to what we offer, which are personalized to each company. But basically, we're going on the same journey with each company. We are creating helping the founder create a better role for themselves. And a lot of the time, that's actually, interestingly, going back to what they were doing when they started the business.
Yeah.
They've taken on all of these generic business roles like finance, marketing, HR, none of which really light them up or fulfill them. They're doing them because someone's got to do them. So what I work with them on is, what do they really love doing? Where can they add most value to the business? And how do we create a role for them around that? So I'm doing that simultaneously while Alice is getting the leadership team confident step up. So we have this hopefully synchronized position where the founder steps forward and the leadership team step up simultaneously. In reality, it's far bumpier than that.
It always is. It always is.
And it's never that kind of, day 1, day 90 and everything's different. It's ups and downs, but the trajectory is the same, that we create a business which is leader-led. And as you know, that then makes the business actually more sellable.
Absolutely.
It has more value because the founder is not dependent on the founder. So it serves that other aim of actually making it more acquirable. And from that perspective,
I absolutely love everything you said there, primarily around the fact that you touched on it earlier in trying to make the journey more fulfilling for the founder. And it might have got to the point where they're doing lots of jobs or wearing lots of hats within the business that doesn't give them the joy that they once had. And it's so important, I think, especially when you've been running a business for a really long time or many, many years, it can be quite exhausting, right? You're doing a lot of things that you don't like to do, you don't want to do. And when you had a job, you were only doing things that you loved to do because that was what your career was, or there or thereabouts, right? And so you come into a role where everything can get overwhelming because of the volume of the amount of things you need to do. And you're not an expert in any of those realms, right? But you like certain aspects and you wish you could do more of it. And I think the power and beauty of a business, once you got it to a certain point, is the fact that you can then let go of areas and actually live a really good life by focusing on doing the things you actually love and making the journey more fulfilling, like you said. And on the plus, as you said as well, like in the back end, by building out a leadership team that is able to take over and you're no longer part of that day-to-day running of the business, someone else can come in and give you a nice payday at the end of your 10-year, 15-year, 20-year journey, and it's worthwhile, right? And so I guess I want to talk to you about transferring that operational ownership from the founder to the leadership team. What are the biggest obstacles founders face when trying to let go? You mentioned it was going to be bumpy, and it usually is. So talk to me about that.
I think the fundamental one is the level of trust they have in the people alone around them. I think trust is massive in business, both between stakeholders, between us and our clients, between suppliers, but particularly internally. And I think what needs to happen is the founders need to have enough trust, and that trust is created purposefully by spending time to understand the individuals. So what they really need to make sure is they understand the individual's why for being there. What's in it for them? What's going to motivate them? How are they going to kind of operate? Because it's not their business. So they can't have the same mentality as the founders got. But they need to have enough similarity and overlap that they're driving in the same way. So it might be talking about future share options. It might be talking about profit-related bonus systems. So some of it is remuneration-based. I think there's a higher level than that. They're the kind of what motivates them at a deeper level, which is important. So the trust is one thing. Another issue is that most businesses don't have an up-to-date, understandable business strategy. That sits in the founder's head. So it's very difficult for someone else to run it if you haven't given them the map. You know where you're heading, you know what route to take, but you haven't told the other person, but you're then giving them the keys to the car and saying, get me there. And they're like, where's there? So what we work with the founders on is creating a strategy document which can be shared with the team and the leadership team in particularly. So they're handing over that as the kind of map which the leaders can work off. So I think getting a lot of stuff documented, the values, the commitments, the principles, the promises, all of these kind of stuff, which is naturally known by the founder, but maybe hasn't been transferred and documented well enough. And then the third element is a good enough dashboard where the founders can see how the business is performing from a distance. At the moment, most founders have a felt sense of their own business because they're in it every day. They have this, this feels good, this feels energetic, this feels, we go a lot on feelings. If you spend time away from the business or you've got more distance between you and the business, you need that really clear dashboard where you can see early where you might need to intervene. So it's like a pilot flying a plane. You have a lot of indicators in front of you, which means that you can put the plane on autopilot and only get involved if need be, because some red light starts flashing. So they've got a really good dashboard. So that's the three things: increase the trust, improve the kind of transference of knowledge, and then put in place a dashboard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that last point you mentioned there is such an important element of the whole thing, because a lot of founders may struggle with giving up control. Right? It's been their baby. It's been their business for many, many years. They've been working in it. And the feelings involved can be quite strong and profound, right? And as you said, it feels good. It feels right. But taking a step back and being able to look at the numbers, looking at things objectively, and then setting the overall targets and the overall KPIs that you want to hit to improve the health of the business is such an important element of everything. So the transference of knowledge going into the leadership team is obviously very important, especially if there's individuals in the organization that are available to make the step up. What if there aren't many people in the organization to make that step up? What would you recommend in terms of hiring? How would you go about finding the right people with the right skill sets? Maybe better than yours to jump into those?
Well, firstly, I would say definitely better than theirs. So I think that what you've got to be confident is bringing specialists in. So functional specialists. At a certain point in the lifestyle cycle, the leader needs to know less about a subject than someone else in the room. So, finance is the obvious one where that's the easy one initially to bring somebody in that's got a better financial understanding than you have. You've got a good understanding in terms of what you know about the operating of the business, but in terms of the macro finance level, that's best done externally because there's that objectivity. So I think what you're looking for is A, people with the right skill set, but B, also more importantly, people that have the same passion for what you've created as others do. So I think the understanding your why and want to be part of the journey, it sounds very cliched, but it is really important, because if they are going to take this on with the same level of intensity that you bring to it, they need to be seeing this as being more than a job. So it does come back to how you are packaging the offering for them. But I always recommend with the people we work with that the first interview you do is very much around the values of the business and the individual's personal values, because you can find the skill set in lots of different places, but finding people that like and trust, that you are comfortable leaving your business with, it's same as taking your child to a preschool. You need to walk in there and you need to feel what that preschool's like. You need to spend time with the person who's going to be looking after your child. And if those boxes are ticked, we feel slightly more comfortable leaving. So the same sense that I think that idea of not shopping hungry, i.e. not just going for the best available at the time, but waiting for the right person and making sure that the fit is really good. And that nice slow onboarding process where it's like any relationship, you just need to spend time together in the room to get to know each other and to make sure it's a good fit. So it's a really difficult one because you're never sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think taking their time over it is the thing again, that better before bigger. There isn't a rush here. Far better to get the right person rather than the best available person at the time you feel you need somebody.
I think you're spot on there in the sense that, especially when it's a really important role in the organization, right? It needs to be the right fit. And if it's not, it can be a real detriment to the business, to the culture, and to just you in general, in the sense that you can no longer have the trust or the detachment that you were looking to get from the day-to-day running, because you're still managing that person. You're still coming in. If they're not better than you at that, then you would be inclined to come in and go, well, that's not right. And so it's so important to do that. So I think it's really interesting you mentioned that in taking your time with that decision, because there's a lot of things that are out there where lots of saying hire fast, and that type of stuff. But I completely agree with you. When it's a big hire, like a really could be a transformational hire for the business, you've got to have your due diligence in place. You have to take your time with it. You have to have numerous interview processes to weed out who's the right fit and who isn't. And once someone is in, you have to also give them a runway period to actually bed into the role. So 100%. In terms of then, you run a couple of client retreats every single year. Talk to me more about that and how that helps the transformation for a business owner to get into the mindset or get into a place where better before bigger is a lifestyle rather than just a thought process.
There's a few things involved. The first thing is that they're 3-day retreats. So it means they've got to spend 3 days away from their business. So in some ways, it's a test as to seeing whether they have created a business which works without them. So by just spending time at the retreat, it proves to themselves that this business they've created actually doesn't fall apart when they're not there. And actually, normally the opposite happens, that the people they left in the business actually step up because they've got the space to do so and really enjoy that stepping up. So it's part of that process in demonstrating to them that this is okay, this can actually work. The second reason they work really well is running a business is quite lonely. So you can get isolated, and you can also believe that you're the only one that has these particular challenges. And as soon as you get in the room with other founders, you realize this isn't a Nick problem. It's a founder challenge. This isn't something that I've done wrong or right. This is just the stage of the journey. Again, like parenting, there's various phases during parenting that, terrible twos are the terrible twos, apparently, and it's down to the parents. Well, it is a little bit, but you know what I mean? It's kind of, so I think the retreats work from that level because they spend time with people like them. And that is reassuring. And thirdly, it works because we have the time to go deeper and find root causes. So rather than just sit at the surface level with conversations, we can actually explore what's really going on for them 2 or 3 levels below, which is impacting that surface level problem. So it allows that conversation to occur. And I don't think anywhere else in their lives they would have the space to explore in the same way. So it's a really special place where they really value coming back to and getting the chance to do some deep work. I think in life generally, we can all be very busy on surface level. We can multitask, we can knock out to-do lists, and we can make ourselves busy. But does it actually move us forward? I don't know. Is it actually fulfilling? Not really, because the next day there's another to-do list and there's another 30 emails. So I think that the work we do at the retreats means that they can go back to the business with a different mindset.
Absolutely.
Something shifts, and therefore there's a shift in the business as a result of them shifting.
Yeah.
It's really important, I think.
Yeah. For sure. And I think it's what you said. it's going past that surface level of what people think is the problem. And it makes me think of the concept of the 5 whys, right? Like you just keep digging deeper. But why is that? And when you start digging deeper, you really do start digging in between, but you have to think. So every time that why is asked, you have to think. It reminds me of one of my uncles. He used to say that he used to turn around and say to me, like, I was such an annoying kid. And I was like, why was that? And then he was like, well, you did exactly that. You would always ask, why? But why? But why? And it would just be like, and then you're just getting deeper and deeper. And it's fundamental. And it's like, it's a childlike curiosity that you need to get to the level. And most people, it gets weeded out of us by the time we're as an adult and running a business and life gets on top of us. So yeah, absolutely. So this stage of the podcast, we like to call the Entrepreneur's Room. And that's a series of questions we like to ask all of our guests to give our viewers and listeners an opportunity to understand how business owners and business leaders think and operate when running their business. So at this stage of the podcast, I always like to ask the same question, which is, how are you currently spending your days as a leader of the business?
I work on a quality over quantity mentality. My days aren't particularly full. Generally, I will have 2 or 3 meaningful interactions each day. So for our business is a micro business, but what we try and prioritize is the high value activities, and the rest of the stuff we'll delegate or we'll use AI, and we try to minimize being distracted by the stuff. So most of my days are either coaching, workshops, retreats, or sessions like this. So those are the things that light me up, and we just focus on what we find fulfilling, which sounds really simple, and it is, but you have to work very hard to get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so most of my days are actually really fulfilling because I spend time with people I enjoy spending time with.
Practice what you preach, Nick. It sounds like.
Very much.
Yeah, exactly.
Normal laughs.
Yeah, that's such an important aspect as well. Like actually enjoying the day-to-day and making it so that your days are exactly how you want them to be and enjoying each interaction. In terms of then, as a business owner, we always like to ask this question and we get lots of different responses. And that is, what are the most important metrics for you when running the business?
The overall metric is the monthly recurring revenue. So we're a service-based business. We run primarily on retainers. So my go to sleep at night metric is monthly retainer value. As long as that is higher than my overhead, then I can sleep at night. So I think it's a very simple metric from that point of view. Below that, it would be the client retention. So the key for us is retaining clients, because we know as we retain clients, we will increase the client spend as they develop more leadership and more services. And we also know we'll get referrals. So in terms of building the business, the most important thing for me is always our existing clients' satisfaction levels, because we know if that is high, then the business is in a good shape. So that's the top metric, and the metric I'm looking at below that.
No, makes perfect sense as well. And in terms of then, you touched on there with referrals, but how are you currently growing the business? What kind of business development activities are you currently doing to get some growth?
Very little. So kind of activities like this where it's awareness raising. Not big on lots of marketing and lots of social and lots of content being pushed out there, because I think it's a very noisy environment and we're all in danger of just adding to the noise, which we're trying to avoid. So for us, it's much more targeted that we will ask our existing clients for referrals. We will target a few businesses that we would like to work with. So we do kind of directly approach ones that we feel are in our sweet spot. We work on a in-room premises that we need to spend time in the room with our clients, which means physically we only work with clients in a certain radius from where we live. So we have a kind of catchment area which we work with. And then because we've got a niche of business size within that, it kind of narrows down the target from that point of view. So the business has always grown organically, which sounds almost like a cop-out answer, but I don't think it is, because I think that if you prioritize delighting the existing clients, then that in itself is a marketing strategy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I always say if you're growing through referrals, you have a fantastic foundation, because what you're doing a great job at, right? And so fundamentally, people, it's the raving fans that will tell others about you, for sure. I like to end every single podcast with the same question, and that is: if you had a magic wand you could wave to solve one business problem, what would that be?
I would make sure that no emails or communication channels operated for 3 hours a day. So I'd make sure they were all inactive between 9 and 12 each day, so that people can get some deep work done and people can spend time conversing with each other in real life. So I think the danger with all of the available communication channels is we can be too busy and too present, and we don't get deep enough work done because of the noise and because of the ping, the attractiveness of the ping. I just got to go and check that. It might be something urgent. And that distracts us from the work we were just about to do. So for me, one of the things I encourage my leaders to do is to block out time and to make sure that time is kind of ring fenced, the same as if it was a client. The 2 hours working on the strategy is the most important time they're going to spend this week. And to allow that to be disturbed by a random email is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we allow that to occur. So for me, if I had a magic wand, I'd make sure business emails and communication channels were closed down for 3 hours a day.
I love it. It's the first time we've got that one, but that's a really great answer, I think. We've all been there as business owners where you're doing something important and then you're pulled left, right, and center, and then it forces you to go, okay, well, I need to create or carve out some time in the day where I can't be bothered, and that has to be outside of working hours, which then results in burnout and exhaustion, and then it's an endless cycle. So I absolutely love that. Love that one. Nick, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. You've been a fantastic guest, and it's been really, really insightful. For all those out there that might want to reach out to you, speak to you, where would they go? How would they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Our website is www.rethinkcollective.com.
Amazing.
So those would be the easiest ways to find me.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you very much for sharing your time today. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you so much.